Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Vice Project Doom. In the last part we started off the game, fought off a lot of boss fights, got our way to Central America, and then we fought a guy who shot our friend from the dead, and then he just laughed at us and then I guess we're done with him. And now we're in the part of the game where things really start to get stepped up. We have a lot more hazards to deal with, a lot more enemies being thrown at us. The latter half of the game is where you're probably going to use a lot of your lives, but because you have infinite continues, you don't have to worry too much about that. This is also where enemies start to take more hits more regularly. A lot of enemies in this general genre tend to only take one shot to begin with, but if an enemy actually takes more than one shot in this, their color palette actually changes when you hit them. At most, they'll take like 3 hits though, never more than that. With that said, we also have these orb enemies who are going to follow onto us constantly. Despite there being a timer counting down, take your time in most of the platforming stages in this game, as rushing through will probably get you killed more often than not because you'll take a reckless jump and get hit into a bottomless pit. Also, just to say it outright, this entire level is going to have a flashing lights warning. It'll already have been on screen, probably. But especially once we finish this screen, the light fading in and out, it's going to get a lot more harsh and rapid. So if you're photosensitive, be careful of that, because it hurts my eyes even a little bit if I'm viewing this at certain times of night or on certain screens. With that said, we started going over the staff of the game last time. Let's actually get back to that. After Tsutomu Nakazawa in the credits is Miyuki Yakushiji, which based on the rest of their work, they were probably also on the art team for this particular entry. This was the 3rd game overall, after the Moffat Conspiracy and Ultimate Basketball. Their work in the 90s didn't last much longer after this, though. They were on Eagle Schult Golf, and then on the arcade and Neo Geo version of Voltage Fighter Gaokaiser, they were on the graphic artwork crew. After that, we jumped from 95 up to 2015 with the Great Ace Attorney 1 on the 3DS. They were on the settings team. After that, they were on Resident Evil 7, Monster Hunter World, and Resident Evil 2 Remake as an environmental artist. Then they were in Devil May Cry 5 as an artist, and then in the Resident Evil 4 Remake, they were a gimmick artist. So they're still working with Capcom nowadays to this day, so they're still pretty active in the industry. Afterwards, we got Hiroshi Takeuchi. This was their first project overall by the looks. Afterwards was Viewpoint on the Neo Geo and FM Towns Genesis. Then Wild Arms 1, they were a battle graphics artist. They were also on the art team for Veldelba Senki, which looks to be a Japan-only RPG shoot-'em-up hybrid. Their last credit overall is a motion designer for Tales of Legendia on the PS2. They were also on Gran Turismo 3's credits, though, for designing some courses. This boss fight hangs on the ceiling and will throw projectiles in 2 different arcs downwards or directly above it, but you can just melt through its health pretty quickly, as you can see there, if you're super aggro about it. Heart, I've been looking all over for you. Huh? Sophia! Oh, it's just you. Gee, thanks. I've had warmer receptions from an icebox. Yeah, hey, I'm sorry. It's just that I'm really worried about Christy. I haven't heard from her. Listen, I just got word that Christy was seen being abducted by some guys dressed in uniforms from that biotech lab. B something or other. Biotech. I owe you one, again. Thanks, Sophia. Don't mention it. A lot of the Ninja Gaiden likes on the system usually try to have cutscenes like that, but I find the way this game does them kind of funny. Because usually the camera angles are one of 2 things when it comes to Hart himself. Either he's doing the thinking face, or it's the close-up on his eyes and forehead. Compare that to Ninja Gaiden, where yeah, we have the 1 shot of Ryu per game they use a lot just for like his shot, reverse shot cutscenes. But there's usually a lot more shots on the environment showcasing the new level you're about to go into in some form, or at least the castle approach kind of deal. It does come off kind of stilted because of that, admittedly. But at the same time, the game's so short and ultimately still fun enough that it doesn't really matter to me. Oh hey, here's one of the cases they actually require you to do the run walk to actually get underneath something. They require that in a couple of cases. In the case you hadn't figured out you could do that before, doing so now will definitely help you in some boss fights to come. Let's go back to the game's staff, though, because we've almost gone through the entire list already. After Hiroshi Takeuchi is Michio Sato. This was actually their earliest project. After this, they were on King of Fighters 95 as a special thanks. They were the scenario writer for Super Real Mahjong Dosokai on the Game Boy Advance, but most of their stuff is in the design aspect, so they're probably on the direction or planning angle on this one overall. They were the director for Blazing Star. They were the direction for Fatal Fury First Contact. That Mahjong game, they were also the game designer. Mario Party Advance, they were a planner, and they were also a director for Walk It Out on the Wii. Mario Party Advance is kind of a stealth hit on the rest of that list, though, because that's so different from a lot of their other things. I like that game a lot. I should do an LP of that at some point, despite me never actually completely finishing it because I deleted my save file with one thing left because I couldn't figure out how to do the one thing. And then promptly figured out how to do that one thing almost immediately on the next save file, so whoops. That felt bad. Next up is probably the person listed in the most credits on the actual design team, though, which is Toshiyuki Nishimura, who in this game is credited as Nenko. This was one of their few just generic staff credits alongside Polestar and Raimise. They're in the special thanks section of Midiami Tensei Gaiden, Last Bible 1 and 2, Arkanoid, Revenge of DOH, and Arcade. They're in special thanks, but their main thing is arts graphics for King of Fighters 95, Fighting Masters background design, Fairyland story backgrounds, Astoniak's graphic designer, Ninja Warriors character designer, Superman on the arcades character design, so largely art team stuff. They were a programmer on Fighting Masters, and they were just a director as well for King of Fighters 95 as Nenko. So, kind of scattered credits, but they were in a lot during the 90s. They seemingly were not in anything post 2007 on the whole, though, barring the Last Bible 2's Switch release. Boss of this stage is this blob man who weirdly reminds me of Man Ray from SpongeBob. They've got 2 attacks when they're not jumping from platform to platform. On the top platform, they'll fire an arc of fire downwards, you can just dodge, and on either of the 2 lower platforms, they'll fire 2 slimes out that will try to home in on you at 1 jump at a time. If you duck and slash, you can take care of the slimes pretty easily, as well as just jump and attack him, so that's, I think, the safest strat here. Otherwise, you can go to the opposite platform as him on the bottom 2 rows, and then just throw a grenade at him for 2 shots at a time. A little dangerous when you're low on health like I am, but as long as you understand the ranges of your weapons, you can get through it pretty safely, I'd say. Again, though, the latter half of the game is definitely where things pick up. Ugh. Christy! Hart, is it really you, Hart? Christy, what have I done? No! I'm sorry. Instructed to... I love you. So very tired. Christy, hold on. Beta... Christy! Beta Corporation. World's largest conglomerate. There's still a piece missing. I've got to follow this to the end. Talk about seeing yourself face to face. He looks just like me. Who is he? What is he? Christy, stand by me. Help me to settle this thing once and for all. Time for our second and final driving section. Despite the level variety, they don't throw a lot of these at you, honestly. It's definitely the harder of the 2 because they throw a lot more enemies at you, the corridors are a lot tighter, and there's also a lot more sudden turns you need to kind of just maneuver around. But as long as you're mash firing from the bottom of the screen, the enemies and hazards probably aren't going to put that much of a threat up to you on top of the amount of coins you get from it. The boss fight is probably where you're going to have trouble here, I'd say, ultimately. I think what also makes these stages a little rougher compared to the other stages is that's the only stages you don't have access to the main gun or the grenades in. If you had some form of grenade that maybe had a larger area of effect, at least this boss probably wouldn't be as bad. At the least, I really appreciate their attempt at what they're trying to do here with the level variety and telling the story in that regard. It comes off a little sloppy, but honestly, I genuinely think if this game got some sort of remake nowadays, wherever the rights are being held, I think they can do some interesting stuff with this with some expansion. With that said, time for the boss fight, which I'd honestly say is one of the harder boss fights in the game. This centipede thing that fires 3 projectiles out of its head, some rings out of its body parts, and some extra projectiles straight out of its tail in the direction it's facing. It's definitely a little hard to predict where it's going to be moving and thus where its shots are going to go because of that, barring whenever it fires the rings at you. But as long as you're keeping a good pace moving, it's going to be easy to get around. If anything, hitting it's harder because you can only damage this thing on its head, and because its head's constantly moving, you need to lead your shots properly, which at certain speeds can be a little rough, on top of certain positions can be rough depending on where you like to place yourself. And since I like to be at the bottom, that means I have an inconsistent time hitting this thing, ultimately. One of the harder bosses in the game due to that, I'd say yes, but at the same time, given this game's relative difficulty, that's not too bad all the same. Albeit, that is something to keep in mind. I am pretty used to these kind of games, so my thoughts on that is also a little skewed. Like, I'd say that if you can't beat Ninja Gaiden, you're probably going to have an easier time beating this kind of deal, I guess is the way to phrase it. And with that, we're on to the final level in the game. The perfect ending to a lousy day. Time to settle the score. Stage 11 actually starts off with another shoot-'em-up section, which is actually a very safe way to get some extra stock going in case you died during that stage and lost some of your stuff. Grenades are pretty good in these sections, but I actually recommend saving them when there's enemies grouped up or if you're trying to hit something very last second. And there's one thing I can give these sections, though. They actually control well, because whenever you're doing a first-person rail shooter like this with a controller, if it's not like a Wii pointer kind of deal, usually the reticle with the controller will either move too slowly, have a weird acceleration ramp, or just generally just feel bad to move around. This is extraordinarily sharp, and that's why I think these are so easy to me, because I'm so used to games doing sections like this badly. Like, in a way, it kind of reminds me of some of the special stages from the Shinobi games, and I just don't like how those feel. And now, welcome to the main part of the final level. This level isn't too bad, although it is definitely long. The worst part of it is that there's some pretty rough jumps with disintegrating platforms that if you're on them for too long, they'll just disintegrate. But on top of that, they'll do that with those enemies that jump from the bottom of the screen to the top and throw some kunais down to you like that. And there's some jumps that get kind of rough due to that alone. With that said, let's now talk about the last two people that are actually credited in the game, albeit one of them is actually uncredited, the game's US version producer, who is Rob Alvey. They were a producer on a lot of projects. Their earliest one was additional production on Faria, A World Mystery and Dungeon on the NES. Gun-Dec, they were on Might and Magic Book 1, Wizardry Night of Diamonds. Directly after this game, though, their next project was actually as a producer on the Super Nintendo version of Ys 3. Which I find kind of interesting, as well as Fighting Masters on the Genesis. They were on the special thanks section as Bunny Waffles on Cool Spot for the Genesis. Dune for the Sega CD, they were a producer. The Genesis version of Aladdin, they were a producer. Dune 2 on the Amiga, they were the director. Jungle Book SNES, they were a special thanks. Lion King SNES, they were a production coordination, which, oh, that explains a lot. The Windows release of 7th Guest back in '97, they were a producer on. War Games on Windows, they were an executive producer. Producer on some of the PS1 James Bond games. Production on Call of Duty 2. Boy and His Blob on the Wii, they were a producer. And they are still doing stuff relatively recently, too, as a producer on the Blood Rain Betrayal game on Windows from back when. We've been expecting you. You've had a very long journey. Yeah, I almost missed my date with you. Yes, well. How about we get straight to business? What's this about? It's about survival. I am merely a provider of what is required for existence. Provider? You're nothing but scum in a business suit. Come now, there really is no need for such hostility. We are a legitimate service which lies, cheats, steals, and assassinates. Real legitimate. I had better hopes for you, Mr. Hart. Things did not go quite as we had planned. So, is this it, Mr. Hart? You disappoint me. I've waited so long for your return. How do you know my name? What do you mean, return? What say we call it fate? You've got a lot of nerve, mister. Fate? I don't think so. How can you deny what you have already seen? Do you recall the capsule? Amazing resemblance, wouldn't you say? Huh? Is it beginning to make more sense now? Your face, like mine, and that thing are all the same. Very good. You and I are merely dolls created to maintain this organization. To keep it prosperous. Forever. After me, you will take over. After you, the one in the capsule will inherit this organization. This is our fate, our destiny. Yours, maybe, but that doesn't mean I'm part of this package. I see. You leave me with very little choice in that case. Enough! You're acting above the law. I'm gonna take you down. Don't defy me, Heart. You are one of us. This disobedience will not be tolerated. Let's do it. Faye is one of the final bosses, actually sort of a mirror match. Damien Hawk here, who's only named the manual, jump from the far left to the middle to the far right and then backwards. And what attack he does depends on what distance you're at. If you're far away, he'll throw grenades. If you're about half a screen away, he'll fire his gun. But if you're about half a body length or so away from him, he'll do the energy whip attack, which you can bait out and then just quickly do some slashes of your own while you're under to do some good damage. You can run under the gunshots as well if you do the duck run, which is nice to know. As for this dude's bio in the manual, which is the only time you'll really know his name before now, Damien Hawk is a successful entrepreneur who has managed to productively operate Beta Corporation since it was handed over to him. He is ruthless, intelligent, and sharp. Personal records in him are sketchy and scattered throughout the world. The story here could be interesting if it was told better, and the fan translation does do that, but I do find this kind of funny. Your skills are impressive. What a shame you won't be needing them any longer. I tire of this game. You must die. Come and get some. Phase 2 is a monster form, which I think kind of implies Heart can also transform into this. It's gonna jump and then slam down, firing 3 projectiles in each direction, high, medium, and low, after landing. And then ducks its head down, which you can slash at if you're below it, but that's kind of rough because you need to take a couple of hits in order to hit him a lot of times there. It is faster though. The safer method is to get away from him, jump over the little projectile, and then throw a grenade or 2 at him to do a couple of hits of damage at a time. The jumps are slightly random, but ultimately it's kind of an easy final boss. With that said, let's talk about the last person in the game's staff who's not even credited in this version because they only did work on the Japanese version because they were the cover artist for the game's box art. Yasushi Torisawa, one of their earliest credits, is as one of the graphics team people for Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei, so one of the earliest Shin Megami Tensei games. They then did stuff like logo designing for Ballast 2, they did the package design for the TurboGrafx version of Golden Axe. They were a cover illustrator for this, Fighting Masters Twin Cobra and Task Force Harrier EX. Jimmy Houston's Bass Tournament USA for the Super Nintendo, they were a coordinator. Bladestorm 100 Years War for the 360, they were a cooperator. And Bladestorm Nightmare in the PS4 in 2015, they were a cooperator. I think that's a kind of funny history there, just in terms of how varied it is. They also did some work on Deathbringer on the PC-98 and Sharp 6800. Exile and MSX, they were package illustrator. XZR, Hakai no Guzo, they were package illustrator. I think that's a pretty interesting career, because I think doing the box art for a game is a very interesting thing to do. 2 more grenades, and Hawk will be down, and then we'll be treated to this game's very lackluster ending, if you can't tell by the timestamp left in the video. I do like the background here, though. I think the parallax on that sky is kind of impressive for the era. There we go. Nothing has changed. This is bigger than you or me. You cannot end it. You cannot destroy it. Every dog has its day. Just remember, Mr. Hart, in you flows the same blood as mine. And that's Vice Project Doom. It's silly, but it's fun. It's a really good Ninja Gaiden-like on the system. I do think, for instance, Ninja Gaiden as a trilogy are overall better, but this game has so many little interesting notes between its 3 gameplay styles, the 3 weapons, and all that, and honestly some fun bosses that I'd say it's worth a shot if you like these types of games a lot. Would I say there's better ones in the system? Yeah, like Ninja Gaiden 2, for instance, is one of my favorite games on that system, period. But also, I'd say, like, Power Blade does some more interesting things, Shatterhand does some more interesting things, but I'd say it's still worth a try. And thus, the 3rd clone awakens, and then the game just ends. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and Thank you guys for watching. Have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.